Good evening. It's Diane Sayre, the LaRouche candidate running for U.S. Senate against Chuck Schumer. For those of you who may wonder why I say that every time, one, I think people should know. Two, I have been discovering that there are many, many people who don't realize that Schumer is up for re-election in November 2022. He is exceedingly unpopular. So therefore, I think he doesn't want anyone to know that he's up for re-election. He's already said that he has no intention of debating anyone. And so the fact that I got 66,000 signatures from New York voters means nothing to him because he's not really interested in democracy. He's interested in carrying out the bidding of his London, Wall Street, and intelligence agency controllers. Now, I wanted actually to discuss a little bit about the LaRouche case. I know many of you saw the program on Friday where we reviewed that, and I would urge people to take a look at it because it's actually quite shocking to know what was done to Lyndon LaRouche in the 1980s when he was not only a presidential candidate, but he was Ronald Reagan's backtrack negotiator to the Soviet Union on the laser defense. And I'm going to show you what former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark had to say about the LaRouche case in a letter that he wrote to then Attorney General Janet Reno. You can see this was from April 26, 1995. And he writes, Attorney General Reno, I've been an attorney in this case since shortly after the defendants were sentenced in January 1990. It wasn't simply LaRouche. They went after many of our top fundraisers. One of my colleagues was given a 77-year jail sentence for taking political loans and not having a stockbroker's license. And this was following something that occurred in 1986, which was a raid by the FBI and US Marshals, 400 people, literally an army, descending on LaRouche's home and the offices of our publishing companies with the intention of assassinating Mr. LaRouche, as we learned through a FOIA request, which LaRouche got to Ronald Reagan and had this called off, and clearly it was orchestrated by the William Weld, George H.W. Bush wing of the Department of Justice. So at any rate, what Ramsey Clark says about the LaRouche case, and I think this is extremely significant because he wasn't a young man when he wrote this, and he was involved in the civil rights movement, and he knew what the FBI had done to Martin Luther King, etc. He said, I bring this matter, that is the LaRouche case, to you directly because I believe it involves a broader range of deliberate and systematic misconduct and abuse of power over a longer period of time in an effort to destroy a political movement and leader than any other federal prosecution in my time or to my knowledge. Okay, that is why when I heard Chuck Schumer on Rachel Maddow say that it was stupid or dumb, he used the word dumb, that it was dumb of President-elect at that point, it was January 3rd, 2017, Donald Trump to want to reorganize the intelligence agencies because they have 6 ways from Sunday for getting back at you. Then I knew that Schumer had to go and somebody had to challenge him who is experienced in this type of combat. I'll put it that way, having been through what I've been through in my 33-year association with LaRouche, 35 years with this organization. And as people who've been watching know, I was also myself, along with Helga Zepp-LaRouche, just named on a blacklist, which is really, as Scott Ritter said, a kill list from the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation as an information terrorist and as someone who should be tried for war crimes. Well, they're getting very desperate because people are not buying their narrative, just as people are not buying the idea that we should be grateful to the Biden administration for having the most rapidly dropping price of gasoline ever seen in American history. If you triple and quadruple the price of something and then you lower it by 50 cents, don't tell the American people that you're doing them a favor. I mean, this is really stupid, but they come up with these crazy things and then they think that people are going to believe them. Now, the situation in Ukraine is very dangerous. The Ukrainian military has been shelling the nuclear power plant at Zaporizhia, or Zhizhia, I'm not sure how you pronounce this, but it's a nuclear power plant that the Russians have control of. They are protecting it as they are the other nuclear power plants and hydroelectric power plants, because remember, the Ukrainian army is not acting in the interest of Ukraine. They're acting in the interest of British intelligence, NATO, and the US State Department. That's who runs Ukraine, and they want a war with Russia. We've been told since the beginning of this that the point is to weaken Russia, to destroy Russia, that this should go on for a long time. They emphatically don't want the Ukrainians to negotiate, and they're perfectly happy to have every last Ukrainian man ground up like hamburger meat in this war, which has been completely unnecessary from the beginning. So the Russians called an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to say we're in danger of something like a Chernobyl being released if you don't stop the Ukrainians from shelling this nuclear plant. Well, since everything Russia says must be propaganda, the proposals that came from the UN Security Council were quite insane. The UN Secretary General Guterres said, well, we should get the Russians out of there and have a peacekeeping force go in and protect the plant. France was even more absurd. They said the Russians should get out and give control back to Ukraine, all of them denying reality. Now, apparently, this is escalating, and Ukrainian forces are also shelling the hydroelectric dam in Kakhovka, which is downriver from the ZNPP, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. And the Russians say, quote, we have been working in emergency mode since the first days of hostilities. This is an emergency situation. The station's own needs backup of 6 kilovolts, I guess, kV, were lost. And the Russians are accusing the US and NATO of nuclear terrorism. So this has to be gotten out. This absolutely has to be stopped. It's a very dangerous situation. And the American people are being fed a bunch of lies. But what I'm discovering in my organizing everywhere is that people don't believe them. Now, on the Mar-a-Lago raid, as I said, a much larger raid was carried out against LaRouche in 1986 when he was a presidential candidate. This has never occurred to a former president. And I will tell you something that you may find controversial, but that this not only is an attack on former President Donald Trump, but it's also a warning to Joe Biden. And you might say, well, Joe Biden is a mean-spirited, nasty fellow with dementia who's about to get us in World War III. Why would they need to threaten him? They already control him. Well, remember, Biden even admitted that it wasn't a good idea for Nancy Pelosi to ride her nuclear-powered broomstick over to Taiwan to provoke a war with China. He said the military thinks it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. She went anyway. What does that say when the president of the United States can't even stop the Speaker of the House from flying to provoke a war with a major nuclear superpower? And apparently there's 5 members of Congress back in Taiwan right now. So I think it should be clear there is a drive to push war between the United States and the 2 major powers who must be our allies if we are going to defeat the Great Reset and the banks holding what they brag about is $140 trillion to enforce this on us. We have to be working with China and Russia. You don't have to love them or agree with everything their governments do, but I think anyone who thinks about it will admit that these are both fiercely independent nations. They do not take kindly to being dictated to from people outside of their countries. And therefore, as far as the central bankers of the world are concerned, their governments have to be overthrown, just as ours does. And that was the point on the raid at Mar-a-Lago. It's not about Trump personally. It's not about Biden personally. It's about the power of the institution of the American presidency to act, to change history, in this case, preferably to get us off the trajectory of nuclear war or nuclear catastrophe. So that's what I have for today. I would also add that September 8th is the 100th birthday of Lyndon LaRouche. I'll be holding a rally somewhere in New York City. I don't know where yet, but we want to have action and activity on that day, September 8th, all over social media. Make a banner, make a sign that says happy 100th birthday, Lyndon LaRouche. Get it out. He should be exonerated. I'll tell you, if you want to liberate the United States from these rogue intelligence agencies, get LaRouche's name cleared. That will go a long way toward doing that. So have a wonderful night, and we'll talk again soon.